Nobody wanted the fat pig, but Mountain Man paid $50 that shocked the entire town. Nobody wants the fat pig. Give her away, and they still won't take her. The shout shot across Deadwood's frozen square like a bullet, and the crowd roared with laughter. Winter 1902 had wrapped the town in ice and smoke. Breath steamed in the air, boots scraped over packed snow, and the sky hung low and gray above the slave market scaffold, an ugly wooden platform built right in front of the courthouse, as if the law itself approved what everyone knew was illegal. On that platform, 22-year-old Lila Whitmore stood with her hands tied behind her back and iron shackles biting into her bare ankles. She shivered, not just from the cold. Her brown dress was torn at the hem, stained with mud and soot. Strands of her golden hair clung to her damp cheeks. Her round face, usually soft and rosy, was blotched red from crying, blue eyes swollen and glassy. She was 5'4", nearly 200 pounds, every curve of her body exposed to a crowd that saw only something to mock. "Turn her around!" the auctioneer barked. Silas Thornwood, thin as a vulture in a fraying black suit, grabbed Lila's arm and spun her slowly. The crowd jeered. "Look at that belly. She'll eat you out of house and home. She belongs in the sty with the hogs." Lila stared at her bare, bleeding feet. Snow stung like needles. She bit her lip hard enough to taste copper, trying to hold back the sob building in her chest. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry in front of them. She failed. Tears spilled anyway. "Delilah Whitmore," Silas shouted, banging his gavel on the post, "owes the grand sum of $50. Cook, laundress, seamstress, strong enough for heavy work, young, healthy. We start the bidding at $10. Silence. Men shifted uncomfortably. $10 was good money. Too good for a girl they'd already labeled worthless. $8? Nothing. $5 then, Silas snapped, sweat beading at his temples despite the cold. $5 for a full-grown worker? You won't find cheaper. A bent old farmer finally lifted a shaky hand. "I'll give $5. Need someone to slop hogs." The square exploded with laughter. "Perfect job for her. She'll feel right at home." Lila's knees trembled. $5. Her father had died a year ago, leaving a debt of $50, and somehow she had come to this. Sold for 1/10 of what they said she owed, like she wasn't even worth the number written on a piece of paper. Silas raised his gavel. $5 going once. A woman near the front cupped her hands around her mouth. "Nobody wants that fat sow. You'd have to pay me to take her home." The laughter came louder, uglier. Lila squeezed her eyes shut. In that moment, something inside her went quiet. Not broken, just numb. $5 going twice. A new voice cut through the cold, deep and iron-hard. $10. The square fell instantly silent. Heads turned. At the back of the crowd, a giant of a man stepped forward out of the shadow of the saloon awning, broad shoulders wrapped in a heavy fur coat, snow dusting his hair and beard, gray eyes fixed not on the auctioneer, not on the crowd, on her. Before we follow the mountain man who just shocked an entire town with 2 words, tell me, where in the world are you listening from right now? For a long moment, no one breathed. $10? For her? People shifted on their feet, craning to see the stranger forcing his way toward the stage. Snow crunched under his boots, heavy, deliberate steps that made the boards of the scaffold tremble when he finally reached it. Matthias Blackthorne. The name traveled through the crowd in a tense whisper. Everyone in Deadwood knew him, if not by sight, then by reputation. A mountain man from Silver Ridge, a hunter who could track wolves through a blizzard, a man who lived alone for years after losing his wife, appearing in town no more than twice a year, broad as an ox, quiet as a ghost, dangerous as a loaded rifle. No one expected him to show up at a slave auction, and certainly no one expected him to bid. Silas Thornwood swallowed hard. "Blackthorn, you said $10? Matthias didn't take his eyes off Lila. Snow melted on his dark hair and beard as heat from the crowd rose around him. His jaw was set, expression unreadable. "I said 10. Lila blinked through tears, confused. Why was this man looking at her like that? Steady, unflinching, not with disgust or judgment, but with something she couldn't name. Something strangely gentle. Silas cleared his throat. "Well, very well, $10. Do we have 11? No one spoke. The old farmer lowered his shaky bid hand, muttering, "Ain't competin' with him. Man's half bare. $10 going once." Matthias's voice cut through the cold again. "I'm not done." Silas startled. "What?" Matthias stepped onto the platform. The board sagged under his weight. He reached into his coat, pulled out a worn leather billfold, and counted off bills with calm, deliberate precision. $10 to buy her freedom from the stage," he said quietly, "and $40 more to clear her debt." Gasps shot through the square. $50. The exact amount she owed, the exact amount no one had ever dreamed would be paid for her. Silas Thornwood stumbled backward. "50? Blackthorn, are you certain?" Matthias didn't even glance at him. He laid the bills flat on the podium. "She walks away owing nothing." Whispers rippled, sharp and startled. $50 for her? He's lost his mind. That mountain beast must be desperate. He wants her for something. No way he's paying that out of kindness. Lila's breath came shallow, ragged. Her world tilted. Her eyes filled again, as if her body didn't know whether to cry from terror or relief. Matthias finally turned to the auctioneer. "Untie her." Silas nodded vigorously. Of course." A deputy hurried forward, fumbling with the knots at her wrists. The rope scraped her raw skin, but when it fell away, Lila felt the first breath of freedom she'd taken in months. The iron shackles unlocked with a cold click. She swayed. Matthias stepped closer, close enough that she felt the warmth radiating from him in the freezing air. He didn't touch her. He only offered the space beside him like a shield. Silas held up the money, eyes shining with greed. Sold for $50 to Matthias Blackthorn. A few people clapped mockingly. Most just stared. Matthias shrugged off his fur-lined coat and draped it over Lila's shoulders before she could protest. The garment swallowed her whole, heavy and warm, smelling faintly of pine and wood smoke. Her trembling eased at once. "You're cold," he said simply. His voice was low, steady, unthreatening, in a way no man's voice had ever been to her. "Thank you," she whispered. Matthias motioned for her to follow him. She stepped down from the stage carefully, toes aching from the freezing boards. He walked beside her, slow enough that her weak legs could keep pace. But when they reached the edge of the crowd, a man spat in the snow near them. "Paying $50 for a hog," he sneered. "Should have bought a real woman." Matthias stopped. The square froze, and when he turned, his eyes were like winter steel. He stepped forward, towering over the man without raising his voice. "One more word," Matthias said softly, "and you'll be eating through a straw for the rest of the winter." Silence. The man backed away. Satisfied, Matthias returned to Lila's side, gentler again. "Let's go." She followed him through the square, past the stairs, past the whispers, past the life she thought she was doomed to die in. When they reached his wagon, Matthias helped her climb up, lifting her by the elbows with surprising tenderness. He tucked a thick wool blanket over her legs, then untied the horses. For a moment, neither spoke. Wind swept through the square, carrying distant jeers, but those voices grew smaller with each heartbeat. Finally, Lila whispered, "Why would you do that? No one ever would." Matthias looked at her, not with pity, but with the kind of quiet respect that broke something inside her. "You'll understand in time," he said. "For now, all you need to know is this: no one owns you anymore." The wagon lurched forward. Deadwood disappeared behind them, and Lila Whitmore's life began again. The wagon wheels creaked as they left Deadwood behind, the frozen ruts of the road jolting beneath them. Lila held Matthias's coat tightly around her, the fur collar brushing her cheek like a living thing. She kept her eyes fixed on her lap, afraid that if she looked up, she would see the crowd again, mocking faces, pointing fingers, mouths curled in cruelty. But all she heard now was the wind and the slow, rhythmic clop of hooves. Matthias drove in silence for a long stretch, letting the horses settle into their pace. He didn't look at her. He didn't question her. He didn't force conversation the way men in town often did when they wanted something. He simply let her breathe. Eventually, when the last echo of the town had faded, he said quietly, "There's water up ahead. We'll stop soon." Lila nodded, her voice too weak to answer. She was still dizzy from the morning, from the humiliation, from the cold, from the impossible truth that someone had paid $50 for her freedom. When the wagon finally slowed near a bend in the road where a stream cut through pines, Matthias climbed down. He circled the wagon and offered his hand. "Take it," he said. She hesitated, not because she feared him, but because she feared disappointing him somehow, falling, stumbling, showing the clumsiness people always made fun of. Matthias didn't move his hand away. He waited patiently, palms steady, arms strong as an oak. After a moment, she placed her hand in his. He guided her gently to the ground. Her feet sank into snow-soft earth, and she winced at the cold that shot up her bare soles. Matthias noticed. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," she whispered. He frowned. "It isn't nothing." Without asking permission, he walked to the back of the wagon, rummaged through a crate, and returned with wool socks and a pair of fur-lined boots, well-made, sturdy. He knelt in front of her and said, "Sit." Her breath caught. No man had ever knelt for her, certainly not with kindness. She sank onto a fallen log. Matthias lifted her foot, slow and careful, as if afraid she might break. She shivered, not from the cold this time. "You don't have to," she began. "Yes," he said calmly, "I do." He brushed snow from her skin. The touch was warm, grounding. He pulled the socks over her feet, then fitted the boots, tying each knot securely. Lila blinked hard. "Why are you being so gentle with me?" Matthias looked up, eyes steady. "Because someone should have been gentle with you long before now." Her throat tightened. She didn't know how to answer. He rose, dusting snow from his hands. "Here, eat." He offered her bread, cheese, and dried meat, simple food, but it smelled rich and comforting. Lila ate slowly, half expecting him to criticize her for eating too much, too fast. He didn't. Instead, he leaned against a pine trunk, arms crossed, watching the trees sway. "You're safe now," he said quietly. Safe. A word she had never believed she'd hear again. They resumed their journey at dusk. The road wound upward into the mountains, narrow trails carved between towering pines, the air colder but cleaner. Lila tugged the blanket around her shoulders, watching the first stars appear. She dared to speak. "Mr. Blackthorne, may I ask something?" "Ask." "Why did you help me? Not just the money. Most men wouldn't have lifted a finger for someone like me." Matthias didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened slightly as he guided the reins around a rocky turn. Finally he said, "I told you the truth earlier. You reminded me of someone." "Your wife," Lila whispered. He nodded. "Rebecca?" She waited. She didn't push. After a long moment he continued, "She was sold at an auction too, not in Deadwood, back east, before I came here. She was bigger than the other women, softer. People laughed at her, called her useless." His voice softened, thickened. "They were wrong. She was the strongest person I ever knew. You loved her very much." "I did. And now she's gone." Snowflakes drifted past the lantern light as he exhaled. 10 years now. Lila lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry." "You don't need to be." Silence again. Comfortable this time. Then Matthias said something unexpected. "When you stood on that stage, I saw the same fear Rebecca carried when I found her, but I also saw the same fight in your eyes, the same dignity." "Dignity?" Lila laughed bitterly. "They called me a pig." "They were wrong. No one's ever said that. I'm not everyone." Her breath hitched. The road narrowed again, climbing sharply. Pines crowded overhead. The cold deepened. Lila shivered, and Matthias noticed instantly. He shifted, reaching behind the seat for another blanket. "Take this." "Are you not cold?" "No." He wasn't lying. He was built for winter. Still, she hesitated before pulling the blanket around herself. "Thank you," she murmured. He didn't answer aloud, but the set of his shoulders softened. As darkness grew, the lantern cast a warm circle around them, cutting through the icy night. Lila felt her eyelids grow heavy, the gentle sway of the wagon lulling her. "Sleep," Matthias said quietly. "You're safe." She tried to resist, but exhaustion won. She curled into the blankets, drifting into the first peaceful rest she'd had in months. The last thing she heard was Matthias's voice, low and steady, as if he were speaking to someone long gone. "I won't fail this one," he whispered. The mountains swallowed his vow. Snow thickened as they climbed higher, the lantern light flickering across towering pines and cliff edges. Lila woke to the rocking of the wagon and the sound of Matthias's steady voice urging the horses forward. She pushed herself upright, blinking away sleep. "How long was I out?" she whispered. 4 hours, Matthias said. "You needed it." She flushed, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to fall asleep." "You were safe," he replied simply. "That's all that mattered." They rounded a sharp bend, and suddenly the mountain opened before them like a hidden world carved out of silence and snow. A clearing emerged between dark pines, and there it stood, Matthias's cabin. Lila gasped softly. It wasn't a shack like she'd expected, no rough, crooked boards, no roof patched with tar paper or rusty tin. This was a home built by hands that cared. The logs were thick and expertly fitted. A stone chimney exhaled a thin trail of smoke into the night. Animal pens sat beside a barn. A stack of neatly chopped firewood was piled waist high. Light glowed warm and golden through the cabin windows. It looked safe. It looked lived in. It looked like something she'd always dreamed of, but never dared desire. Matthias brought the wagon to a stop. "Welcome," he said quietly. "This is home." Home. The word pierced her deeper than any insult ever had. He stepped down and helped her as he always did, one hand steady at her elbow, careful, mindful of her balance. He didn't drag. He didn't rush. He treated her as if she were fragile porcelain he refused to let break. Inside, the cabin embraced her with immediate heat. The hearth was enormous. Big stones stacked from floor to ceiling, flames crackling bright. A bearskin rug lay spread across the wooden floor. A long table stood beneath shelves filled with jars, herbs, flour, dried fruit. Hooks held pots that gleamed in the firelight. A rocking chair sat near the fire, wool blanket folded neatly over the back. Everything was tidy, ordered, purposeful, but nothing felt cold or empty. Matthias removed his gloves. "Sit by the fire, warm yourself." Lila hesitated. "What can I help with?" "You've helped enough by surviving," he said gently. "Sit." Something inside her melted. She lowered herself into the rocking chair. It creaked softly, wrapping her in its warmth as the fire thawed her bones. Matthias returned from the wagon carrying her small bag, the only thing she owned besides the clothes he'd given her. He set it by the stairs. "You must be hungry," he said. I can cook." He shook his head. "I'll do it. Tonight, you rest." She watched as he moved through the kitchen, not graceful exactly, but assured, skilled. He chopped vegetables with strong, precise strokes. He stirred a pot of stew, added salt, tasted, nodded in satisfaction. The smell filled the cabin, rich, warm, comforting. Her chest squeezed painfully. No one had ever cooked for her, not once. When he ladled stew into 2 bowls and handed her one, she murmured, "Thank you." Matthias sat opposite her at the table. He never stared, never rushed her. He ate slowly, giving her time. Lila ate cautiously at first, waiting for some comment, some joke, some tightening of a man's mouth as he judged her. None came. Instead, he said, "Rebecca made a stew like this. She'd be glad someone else likes it." Lila lowered her spoon. Does it hurt you that I'm wearing her clothes?" Matthias paused, considering his answer carefully. "No," he said at last. "Rebecca's things were meant to be used, not stored away until they rot. She'd be glad someone like you was wearing them." "Someone like me?" He held her gaze, unflinching. "Good-hearted, brave, worth saving." She swallowed hard, unable to breathe for a moment. After dinner, Matthias gathered extra blankets and handed them to her. "Come upstairs. I'll show you your room." The stairs creaked softly as they climbed. At the top were 2 doors. He opened the one on the left. Lila froze. The room was small but beautiful, cozy in a way that made her chest ache. A quilted bedspread covered the mattress. A wooden dresser sat beneath a window that overlooked the valley, the moonlight soft across the snow. A braided rug warmed the floor. A bouquet of dried lavender hung by the window, filling the room with a faint, comforting scent. "I prepared this earlier," Matthias said quietly. "Thought you might want space of your own." "You did this today?" He nodded. "Before going to town." She turned to him slowly. You knew you would bring someone back?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, in his rumbling voice, he said, "I had a feeling I'd need the room soon." Her breath stilled. Not because of romance, she was too damaged to assume such things, but because she realized he had cared enough to prepare comfort for a stranger. "I hope it's to your liking," he added. "It's the most beautiful room I've ever seen," she whispered. He exhaled softly. Relief. "Good." He stepped back. "If you need anything, I'll be downstairs. I'll keep the fire going all night." As he turned to leave, Lila gathered her courage. "Matthias?" He paused. Why do you keep looking at me as if I matter?" He turned to her fully. In the dim lantern light, his eyes softened. Not pity, not longing, but a kind of quiet respect she'd never been given. "Because you do matter, Lila." Her lips parted. "All my life," she whispered. "No one ever thought so." His voice dropped, steady and warmer than the fire below. Then they were blind. For a moment the world held still. Only the wind outside broke the silence. Then Matthias stepped back, giving her space. "Rest now. Tomorrow I'll show you around the ridge." He descended the stairs, leaving her alone with the lavender-scented air and the faint warmth of his words. Lila sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time in her life, she cried not from pain, but from the overwhelming sensation of finally feeling safe. The first rays of dawn crept through the cabin windows, painting thin stripes of gold across the wooden floor. Lila woke slowly, wrapped in quilts softer than anything she'd ever slept beneath. For a moment, she lay still, blinking at the wooden beams above her, unsure where she was. Then the scent of coffee and pine drifted up from downstairs. Matthias, the mountain, the cabin, safety. She exhaled, a sound half relief, half disbelief. Her life had changed in a single day. When she came downstairs, Matthias was already dressed in a thick flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows as he sharpened an axe near the hearth. Sparks caught the firelight as steel kissed stone. He looked up the moment her foot touched the last step. "Morning," he said, a simple word, but his voice softened around it. "Sleep well?" "Yes," Lila whispered, "better than I ever have." He nodded toward the table. "Eat first, then I'll show you the ridge." Breakfast was oatmeal with honey, freshly baked cornbread, and berries he'd defrosted by the fire. She ate slowly, savoring every taste. He watched discreetly, not judging, but checking that she had enough, offering more when her bowl emptied. He treated her hunger as something natural, not shameful. It warmed places inside her she didn't even know were cold. Later, Matthias led her outside. The air was crisp, cold enough to nip her cheeks, but sunlight filtered through the pines, catching on snow and turning the whole ridge into a field of diamonds. Ravens called overhead. The world was vast, wild, untouched. "Do you like it?" he asked. "I've never seen anything so beautiful," she breathed. He glanced at her, just for a heartbeat, with a look that said he agreed, though not exactly for the reason she meant. He guided her through the homestead, the barn, the smokehouse, the root cellar, the fenced-in berry patch. He showed her where deer tracks cut through the snow, where wolves sometimes passed, where foxes liked to burrow near the low hill behind the cabin. Lila absorbed it all, clinging to the idea that maybe, just maybe, this could be her new life. But peace never lasts, not when shadows travel faster than footsteps. It started with boot prints. At midday, as they walked near the barn, Matthias stopped so abruptly Lila bumped into his back. He crouched, brushing snow aside with gloved fingers. "Someone was here," he said. Lila's breath froze. "Here? At the cabin?" "Last night." He followed the trail with his eyes, a thin zigzag through the trees. 3 hours before dawn," he murmured. A man, heavy-set, wore town boots. He rose, jaw tightening. "You know anyone who'd come up here?" She shook her head, panic rising. "No, I don't. I didn't have anyone left." Matthias scanned the tree line with the cold precision of a predator. "Someone followed us from Deadwood." Her stomach dropped. "Why?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. They went inside immediately. Matthias bolted the door. Lila stood by the table, her hands shaking as she tried to understand what danger she could possibly bring. Matthias sensed her fear. "They won't reach you," he said firmly, "not while you're here." "Who?" she whispered. "Who would follow us?" He hesitated. Then, in a low voice that rumbled like distant thunder, he said, "Silas Thornwood isn't a man who likes losing money, even if I paid it." "But he got the full $50, she protested. "He did." Matthias's eyes hardened. "But men like him don't like being told no. They like control. They like ownership. You humiliated him by being freed, Lila." Her knees weakened. She gripped the table. "But I didn't do anything." "Yes," he said. "You survived. That's enough to anger a man who feeds on power." Lila felt sick. Matthias stepped closer, his voice steady. "Listen to me. You are not going back there, no matter who comes up that mountain. But if someone wants me, no." His voice cut sharp and certain. "You're not an object to be returned or reclaimed. You're a person, and you're under my protection." A fragile silence stretched. Lila lowered her head. "I'm sorry, Matthias. I didn't want to bring trouble to your home." He stiffened. Slowly, he lifted her chin with a single rough knuckle. "Don't apologize," he said. "Not for existing, not for needing help, not for being here." Her breath trembled. "I bought your freedom," he continued softly, "not to lock you up, not to own you, but to give you a chance to live. This ridge can be your home, if you choose." Do you want me to stay?" she whispered. His jaw tightened, not with reluctance, but with words he wasn't sure he had the right to say. "Yes," he answered finally. "I want you here." Her chest tightened painfully. "But only if you want it too." She nodded, tears burning behind her eyes. "I do." He exhaled, and the tension in his shoulders eased. But peace was short-lived. That night, as snow fell heavily against the windows, Matthias tended the fire while Lila sat wrapped in blankets near the hearth. Shadows danced along the walls. "Matthias," she said quietly. "There's something I haven't told you." He paused mid-reach, turning to face her fully. "Go on." She swallowed. "Silas didn't just sell me for the debt. There was something else he wanted." Her fingers trembled in her lap. "My father left me something before he died. Something Silas always wanted." Matthias's eyes narrowed. "What did he leave you?" Lila looked at the fire, voice small, almost ashamed of it. "Land." Matthias froze. "Where?" he asked slowly. "Just beyond Silver Ridge," she whispered. 100 acres, forest, river, mineral rights. My father inherited it from his brother." Matthias's breath deepened. "That's a fortune." "I know," Lila whispered, "and Silas wanted it. But the deed is locked away, hidden. Only I know where." Matthias stared at her a long moment, realization settling like heavy snow on his shoulders. "That's why someone was here," he said, "not to reclaim you." "To take what I own," she finished. The fire crackled, filling the silence. Matthias stepped closer, his shadow falling across her lap. "Lila," he said, voice low and unshakable, "I'll protect your land the same way I'll protect you. No one will take it, or you, not while I draw breath." She looked up at him, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much?" He knelt beside her, resting one large hand on the edge of her chair, but not touching her. "Because your life matters," he said. "Because you deserve peace. Because you're not alone anymore." And then, softer still, "Because I'm beginning to care for you far more than I should." Lila's breath caught. The fire popped, and somewhere beyond the cabin walls, the snow-covered woods hid the presence of a man who would not stop until he got what he wanted. Snow had swallowed the ridge by morning. Thick drifts piled against the cabin walls, soft as wool, but hiding the hard truth beneath. Someone had been here again. Matthias stood on the porch at dawn, coat unbuttoned despite the cold, breath rising in white clouds. He studied the ground with the intensity of a tracker born from the earth itself. Lila hovered in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, watching him with growing dread. He crouched. 2 sets of prints this time, one deep, one lighter, both fresh. He rose slowly, jaw hardening. "They came closer last night," he said. "Too damn close." "How close?" Lila whispered. Matthias pointed to the edge of the porch. "They stood right there, watching." Her stomach dropped. "Me?" "No," he said. "Us." The word steadied her and terrified her all at once. Matthias brushed snow from his gloves and turned to her. "Get dressed. Eat something warm. I'm boarding the windows and securing the barn." "Is it Silas?" she asked. He hesitated, just barely. "Either him," Matthias said, "or someone working for him." "Because of the land." Matthias didn't sugarcoat it. "Yes." Fear pricked up her spine, sharp as needles. "Matthias, what if he takes it? What if he takes me?" Matthias stepped forward, closer than he ever had before. Close enough that she could smell pine in his beard. Close enough that his voice wrapped around her like another blanket. "No one is taking you," he said. "Not while I'm alive." Her throat tightened. "But why would you risk—" "Because you deserve a life," he cut softly. "Because you've been hurt enough. And because I won't stand by while someone destroys what's yours." He didn't say the rest. "Because you matter to me. Because I'm beginning to care for you more than I can hide." But she heard it anyway. He worked all morning, hammering planks over the windows, securing the shutters, checking the rifle he kept above the hearth. Every movement held a silent promise. Nothing would force its way through. Lila helped where she could, warming soup on the stove, packing food, fetching blankets. But her fear grew as the snow deepened outside and the wind rose like a warning. By early afternoon, Matthias stopped working and walked inside. His gloves were dusted with frost. His breath came out in sharp bursts. "It's time," he said. "For what?" "To talk about what happens when they come." He sat across from her at the table, elbows resting on his knees, eyes fixed on hers. "Lila, if someone comes up this mountain demanding you, demanding your land, you let me speak. You don't answer them. You don't open the door. You don't take one step outside." She swallowed. "And you?" "I'll handle it." "How?" she whispered. He didn't answer in words. He simply reached behind the cabin door and lifted a hunting rifle so large she had to blink twice. Her breath stuttered. "Matthias, I don't want anyone hurt." He set the rifle down gently, as if calming her instead of arming himself. "No one gets hurt unless they force my hand. But I've dealt with men like Silas before. I know what they respect." "And what's that?" Matthias's voice dropped to a low growl. "Strength. Before she could reply, the horses in the barn let out a shrill, panicked whinny. Matthias's head snapped toward the window. "They're here." Lila's blood froze. He strode to the front door and looked out through a thin gap in the boarded wood. "Two men," he said, "one armed." "Silas?" she asked. "No, hired hands. Silas is too much of a coward to come himself." The men shouted from outside, "Blackthorn, open the door. We got business." Matthias turned to her, his voice controlled, deadly calm. "Go upstairs. Now." She shook her head. "I won't leave you. Lila." His voice softened for a heartbeat. "I need you safe." Her legs trembled, but she climbed the stairs, stopping just behind the banister where she could see him below. He opened the door only a crack, enough to face the men but not enough for them to force their way inside. Snow blew in, swirling around his boots. "What do you want?" Matthias asked. The man closest to the door sneered. "Silas wants his property back." Matthias's eyes went dark. "She's not property." "She's worth land," the man retorted. 50 acres of timber with river access. He wants the girl or the deed." Matthias didn't blink. "He gets neither." The man spat into the snow. "You can't hide her forever, Blackthorn. Silas pays good money for what he wants. We'll be back with more men." Matthias leaned forward, voice low enough to shake the icicles hanging from the roof. "Come back up this mountain, and you'll leave it in pieces." The men hesitated, just long enough to realize he meant every word, then backed away, cursing as they stumbled through the snow. Matthias closed the door, bolted it shut. Only when the footsteps faded did he allow himself to exhale. Lila hurried down the stairs. "Matthias!" He turned, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked afraid, not for himself, for her. He cupped her face with one warm, calloused hand. "I won't let them take you," he said. "Not today, not ever." His voice trembled, just slightly, and Lila realized this wasn't just protection anymore. This was the beginning of love. By nightfall, the mountain had gone silent again. But it was the wrong kind of silence, not peaceful, not gentle, a silence that held its breath before something terrible arrived. Matthias spent the evening checking every window, every door latch, every loose board. Lila followed him room to room like a shadow, quiet, shaking, afraid she'd blink and lose him. When he finally sank onto the bench near the fire, she approached slowly. "Matthias," she said softly, "they'll come back." He nodded once. "Yes, with more men." "And Silas?" "Eventually." Her fingers curled into the edge of her dress. What are we going to do?" Matthias looked at her, then really looked. The fire reflected in his gray eyes like embers waiting for wind. "Lila," he said quietly, "I can keep fighting for you. I will, but I need you to hear something." She held her breath. "This cabin, it isn't just a shelter anymore. It's our line in the sand. If they come for you again, I won't stand in front of you alone." She frowned softly, confused. "Then who?" "You," he said. Her heart stumbled. "What?" Matthias leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "You have a voice, a mind, a right to fight for your life. I won't hide you upstairs like a fragile thing, not when you've survived more than most men I know." Her lips parted. "But I'm scared." "You think I'm not?" he murmured. "I'm terrified." He lifted his gaze to hers. "Because losing you would break something in me I can't rebuild." He'd never said anything like that before. Warmth burst inside her, colliding with fear, turning it into something sharper, fiercer. She moved closer, kneeling in front of him so she could look into his eyes. "Matthias," she whispered, "I don't want you to fight alone." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered against her cheek, thumb gentle. "You won't?" he said. A knock shattered the moment. No, not a knock, a pounding. Matthias rose instantly, rifle already in his hands. Lila swallowed hard and stepped beside him, close enough that her shoulder touched his arm. He stiffened. "Lila, I'm standing with you," she said, voice trembling but steady. "You told me this cabin is our line, then let us hold it together." Another pounding, a man shouting, "Blackthorn, open up! By order of the Silva County Sheriff, we're taking the girl and the deed." Matthias whispered, "The sheriff's in Silas's pocket." "I know," she whispered back. "You could get hurt. So could you." Their eyes locked. Then Matthias nodded. "Stay behind me, but stay with me," he said. She nodded. He opened the door just enough to meet the sheriff's glare. Snow whirled around them. Lanterns glowed behind a line of deputies. 6 men, maybe 7. The sheriff raised a hand. "Move aside, Blackthorn." Matthias didn't move. Lila stepped into view. The sheriff blinked, startled. "Girl, this ain't your business." "Yes, it is," Lila said, voice steadier than she felt. "I am not property. I am not for sale. And this land, my father's land, does not belong to Silas Thornwood, no matter what lies he paid you to say." A murmur ran through the deputies. The sheriff's face reddened. "Girl, step out here now, or—" Matthias raised the rifle, not aiming, just warning. "Or what?" he asked. The confrontation hung in the icy air. One wrong breath could trigger it. Lila felt Matthias's presence beside her, solid, steady, unshakable, and she realized she wasn't the girl on that auction stage anymore. She was someone worth fighting for, and someone ready to fight back. The standoff stretched like a bowstring pulled too tight. Snow drifted between the sheriff's lanterns. Somewhere in the woods, a wolf howled, long, lonely, and warning. Lila felt Matthias's arm brush hers, steady as a mountainside, but she took one step forward until she was fully at his side, not behind him, beside him. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Girl, think carefully. This man's twisting your head. Silas Thornwood is your legal creditor." "No," Lila said, cutting him off with a voice that surprised even herself. "Matthias paid the debt, in full, $50. Silas accepted it." "That wasn't official," the sheriff snapped. "There's no ledger record. Thornwood never signed—" "Because he didn't expect anyone to pay it," Lila answered. "He expected to own me forever." The deputies shifted uneasily. One lowered his lantern, another cleared his throat, mumbling, "This doesn't feel right." The sheriff whipped toward them. "Quiet! We're taking the girl." Matthias stepped forward, rifle relaxed, but ready. "You lay a hand on her, and you won't leave this ridge standing." The sheriff reached for his holster. A gun clicked behind him. Everyone froze. The oldest deputy, a gray-mustached man with tired eyes, stepped out of formation and pointed his revolver at his own sheriff. "That's enough, Clayton. The girl ain't chattel. The man paid the debt. Everybody in town knows Thornwood cheats the system." The sheriff sputtered. "Emmett, put that down." Emmett shook his head. "No, we're lawmen, not hired muscle." 2 more deputies stepped back from the sheriff. One said, "I ain't risking my neck for Silas Thornwood." Clayton looked around and realized he no longer had an army behind him. He cursed under his breath, turned toward Matthias and Lila, and spat into the snow. "Fine. This ain't over. Thornwood won't let this stand." Matthias didn't flinch. "Then let him come himself instead of sending cowards." The sheriff stalked off down the trail, deputies scattering after him like startled crows. Their lanterns faded into the dark until only snow and silence remained. Matthias shut the door slowly. Inside the cabin, warmth wrapped around them. Firelight flickering over the walls, stew simmering on the stove, the smell of pine wood drifting through the air. Lila exhaled shakily, shoulders slumping in relief. Matthias set the rifle aside and turned to her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No, I'm all right." He stepped closer. "You were brave." She managed a trembling smile. "I wasn't, not really, but I knew I wasn't alone." Matthias brushed his knuckles gently along her cheek. "You'll never be alone again." Firelight danced in their eyes. Snow tapped softly on the roof. A world that had once despised her now felt impossibly far away. Matthias said quietly, "You're safe here." Her breath caught. Is this truly my home now?" "If you'll have it," he murmured. Lila leaned into him, letting her forehead rest against his chest. His arms came around her carefully, as though holding something precious. "This cabin," she whispered, "feels like the first place that's ever been mine." "It is," Matthias said, "and so am I, if you want." Lila lifted her head. Tears shimmered, but didn't fall. "I want." Their kiss was soft at first, then deeper, full of everything they'd fought for and everything that waited ahead. The fire glowed brighter, as if blessing the moment. Outside, the wind swept over the ridge. Inside, a new beginning settled into the walls. Spring sunlight spilled across Silver Ridge, warming the pine needles and melting the last traces of winter. The cabin, once a lonely outpost, now stood sturdy and expanded, with a second porch, a larger barn, and a fenced garden overflowing with early shoots. Lila Blackthorn stepped outside with a basket on her hip. Her daughter Rose tugging at her skirt, while little Samuel toddled behind with chubby determination. Lila laughed softly, helping Samuel keep his balance. Her laughter rang warm and bright, like something that had always belonged to this mountain. She no longer moved like someone trying to take up less space in the world. She moved like someone who belonged in every inch of it. Her figure was fuller than ever, glowing with health, wrapped in a blue calico dress Matthias had sewn himself, badly, unevenly, but with love in every stitch. Her blonde hair was braided loosely down her back, her cheeks flushed pink from the morning air. Matthias watched from the doorway, older, still powerful, streaks of silver now brighter in his beard. His eyes softened whenever they landed on her. "Breakfast is ready," he called out. Rose squealed and ran to him. Samuel followed, wobbling in crooked little steps. Lila approached last, leaning up to kiss Matthias on the cheek. "You burned the bacon again," she teased gently. He grunted. "Stove's faulty." "It's the cook that's faulty," she said, smiling. Inside, the house smelled of coffee and bread. On the wall hung 3 framed drawings, Rose's proud attempts at sketching bears, horses, and her baby brother. On another shelf lay Matthias's old hunting knife, retired, replaced by tools for carpentry and farming. Violence had no place here anymore. After breakfast, Matthias saddled the horses. "I'm heading into town," he said. "Need supplies?" Lila's smile faded a little. "Be careful." He stroked her arm. "Always. Deadwood had changed in 5 years, but not as much as the mountains above it. When Matthias arrived, people stopped to greet him with respectful nods, not fear. Children waved, women smiled politely, men tipped their hats. The sheriff was new, Emmett, the old deputy who'd taken a stand that night. But Silas Thornwood had not survived the winter 2 years ago. His gambling debts had worsened, his health declined, and one day he simply didn't wake up. His saloon and holdings were auctioned off, ironically, legally this time. When Matthias returned to the ridge near sunset, Lila was waiting on the porch, rocking baby Lily in her arms. Her eyes lit up the moment she saw him. "You're home," she whispered. He kissed her forehead. "Always." They stood together in the golden light, children laughing, mountains stretching endlessly around them. $50 had bought her freedom. But love, quiet, steadfast, and patient, had built everything that came after.